What's going on, everybody? My name is Jake. Welcome to The Haunted Beard. Thank you for joining me. Today, I want to give you my thoughts and review for Heart Eyes. This is the slasher film that I finally got a chance to see. And this is a bit of a unique one, as this is a bit of a romantic comedy slasher film. So kind of an interesting mashup here. This one stars Mason Gooding, who you probably know from the last couple Scream films, and as well as Olivia Holt, who is in 2023's Totally Killer. And this one tells the story of the Heart Eyes Killer, who has wreaked havoc on Valentine's Day over the last couple years by stalking and killing romantic couples. And this film was directed by Josh Ruben, who has done some work in the horror genre before. I've seen a couple of his films, Scare Me and Werewolves Within. Both of those I enjoyed well enough, but was not, blown away by them by any means. And Heart Eyes is kind of along those same lines. It's an enjoyable enough film. I think it has enough going for it that I was entertained and enjoyed my time enough, but it is by no means going to be the next all-time slasher classic or anything. And coming from someone who is not typically a fan of romantic comedies, that is usually a genre I steer clear of. However, there are a few exceptions. When you take my favorite genre of horror films and then try to, cross-mix it with possibly my least favorite genre. And so I was pretty curious to see how he was going to be able to pull this off. The film starts off and we're introduced to one of our main characters, Allie, played by Olivia Holt. And she works for a jewelry company in the marketing division. She is getting ready to head into work one day, and she has quite a bit of anxiety because she fully expects to get fired because the marketing ad she just released was an absolute disaster for Valentine's Day. And on her way into work, she stops into a cafe and literally bumps into Mason Gooding, who plays Jay. And it turns out that he is the sort of marketing guru that her company has called in to do damage control. And so she gets a pleasant surprise that morning at work. They decide to meet together later on that day over dinner to discuss how to, fix the problem and get things back on track. And of course, there's a little bit of chemistry and a little bit of a romantical spark that kind of really ignites and sets off the rest of the film forward. And the two leads here are pretty good. Certainly there have been worse characters in romantic comedy movies as well as slasher films. And so they're charming, they're likable. I think they have good kind of on-screen chemistry, at least with regards to the relationship that kind of does, sort of doesn't emerge. It's a little rocky, which I think at least makes things a little bit entertaining. But the characters are at least likable. It's easy to kind of get on board with them, and you enjoy watching them and kind of seeing what the direction their relationship is going to take. But ultimately, you're really just looking forward to the slasher killer to head after them so we can see them freak out and try to survive, sort of thing. And I think the make it or break it for this film is really going to be the tone and the humor. This is a movie that really kind of plays into some of those typical rom-com type tropes. And, it is self-aware, and it tries to lean into and play off some of those things in a humorous way. Some of it works fairly well, other parts of it not so much. So it's kind of a mixed bag there. There's a few jokes that I laughed at, some other jokes that I just thought were pretty cheesy and kind of rolled my eyes at. And so, if you get on board with the tone, you're going to have a good time. If you find it funny, obviously, you're going to have a good time. But for me, it was kind of a mixed aspect. It is self-aware, it tries to lean into some of that stuff. For the most part, it doesn't try to take itself too seriously, and so you're kind of able to enjoy it for what it is. However, there are a few moments where I feel like the film did kind of try to take itself too seriously, and so in some ways, it kind of almost became the very thing that it was trying to kind of parody and spoof a little bit. And so there are a few moments that I feel like they could have kind of, loosened it up and just kind of continually played out the humor instead of playing so much into the serious vibes. Some of the self-aware stuff works. There's a scene where they get attacked by the killer and they end up getting split up, and Allie just kind of flees and runs off, sort of leaving Jay behind. And I like that kind of became this major sort of contention point later on in the movie where he's like, you ditched me, you just left me, which I feel like, happens fairly often in slasher movies, but it like doesn't ever really get brought up. And so I kind of like the fact that they kind of lean into that and made sort of a humorous moment out of it. And so there's moments like that where the film succeeds, but then there's other moments where it kind of falls into some of the typical, I guess you could just say, cliched scenes that we've seen many times before, where Allie's getting chased in a park at night by the killer, and, you know, she trips and falls. He's just about to, you know, kill her and stab her. Only out of nowhere, a cop shows up. She looks over, sees the cop, and then looks right back, and the killer's gone. So, you know, it's like saved by some miraculous thing and then literally disappears in the blink of an eye sort of thing. And so there's a few moments like that where you're like, yeah, okay, this is a little bit much. The main highlight for me, though, is a scene that occurs later on in the film at a movie drive-in. And I won't get into specific details, but this is quite a good scene. I had a lot of fun with it. I would say this scene alone is kind of worth the price of admission. And this is actually one of those moments that is a little bit more serious that I think actually kind of works, because something very humorous is happening at the same time that there's this serious moment. And so they're fleeing the killer. They hop into somebody else's van and they have this very kind of heart-to-heart conversation. Meanwhile, there's something else happening in the van that makes the whole moment pretty hilarious. And then as that scene progresses, you get just some pretty gnarly, bloody violence. And that's another one of the highlights. I think the film does a pretty good job with the kills, especially in this drive-in sequence. There's a couple pretty gnarly ones that are quite memorable. So overall, you know, if you want the blood and guts, you're going to get a little bit of blood and guts that I think will be pretty satisfying overall. And the final thing I wanted to talk about is the ending. And I'm going to be vague here because I don't want to get into spoilers, but the ending for me is also kind of a mixed bag. And the thing about the ending is, you know, when you have slasher movies, oftentimes there's kind of a build up to you know, the reveal of who it is. And sometimes slashers are supernatural and sometimes they're just human. And oftentimes when you have a slasher killer that's only human and you get this reveal, it feels a bit anticlimactic, because when the killer is wearing a mask, they kind of just take on that sort of superhuman, supernatural type feel to it. And then when you take off the mask and you see that it's just a person, they're still kind of playing into that slasher killer. In other words, things get very kind of over dramatic and over the top and over serious, where it just feels cheesy to see now a real person kind of acting and behaving this way, if that makes sense. It's kind of one of the issues I had with the latest Scream film, where if you've seen that, the climax of that movie, when you get the reveal of the killer, it's just a little too much over the top and kind of cheesy. And I got a little bit of that here. And so that was kind of a bit of the negative aspect of the climax. However, the positive aspect is, again, regarding the kills, as there is, again, some more pretty gnarly blood and gore here. And there's some pretty solid kills here in the climax. And so, yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag. There's a little negative, but there's also some positive there as well. So overall, this is one that I enjoyed well enough. It's a film that I probably won't really return to, but I would recommend this. I think it is a good film for couples. This is one that if I was going to return to it, I might actually suggest watching it with my wife, who I think she would actually enjoy it. It's a little bit more of a light horror, although you do get some good kind of blood and guts in there a little bit. But with that kind of rom-com, it would make it more palatable for somebody who's not, you know, a hardcore horror fan. And so it's kind of a good compromise. If you and your date are looking for something good to watch, I would think this would give you an enjoyable enough time. And so for what it is, it's not great, but I enjoyed it at least for a one-time watch. So I'm going to go 6 out of 10 here for Heart Eyes. So those are my thoughts. Hit me up down below. Would love to hear from your guys. Always interested in hearing your thoughts on these movies. That's all I got. Thank you so much for watching. Like always, greatly appreciate it. If you got anything out of this video, go ahead and do me a favor and do not click that subscribe button unless you want to be haunted by the beard.